When I brought Missy home from Haiti 2 years ago, she only spoke a few words of English. So I had to get creative in order to communicate with her, and I learned pretty quickly that music was an effective bridge. Singing songs together is how we first bonded. In fact, Your Great Name by Chris Tomlin and Shake Your Booty by KC and the Sunshine Band will always be two of my favorite songs because they were the first American anthems she really liked. I think it's so cool that the Bible reveals God has a favorite tune too. His favorite song is actually a book in the Old Testament, and the formal canonical title for it is The Song of Songs. So based on the Hebrew idiom in the title, this is basically the song in the highest rotation on God's iPod. How awesome is that? When I was in my early 20s, I was dating a guy, well, actually dating is the wrong term. We were plating, which is platonic dating. That is, we had gone to dinner a couple of times and he paid, so I totally count that as a date. But we weren't really romantic, like we'd never even held hands, much less kissed. But I liked him and I thought he liked me. So I was pretty fired up when he asked me to dinner at a really fancy restaurant for Valentine's Day that year. I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. So we go to this really nice restaurant for Valentine's Day, and I can't remember if it was before or after the meal, but he brings out a box from one of the nicest stores in Nashville for women's clothing, and I'd never had a man give me something to wear before, and so it seemed a little presumptuous, but also a little exciting because I thought he must really like me if he bought me a gift from this store, and it was, elegantly wrapped, and I opened it sitting there at the table, and I pulled out a dress, and some of you will know this brand. It was a St. John's dress, which are very, very expensive. I'd never had a St. John's dress before. It was absolutely gorgeous, and it was 2 sizes too small. And when I told this less than brilliant beau that the dress was actually 2 sizes too small, he said, I know, I did that on purpose. And then he went on to say, Lisa, you are 15 pounds away from perfect. But as soon as you can fit into that dress, I'm pretty sure I'll fall in love with you. I think most of us have had something along those lines where somebody or a situation caused us to feel just a little less than good enough. I find that all the time on the road. I constantly meet women who have that feeling of I'm just not quite good enough. I don't meet the standard. I was talking with a woman at a retreat just last weekend, and she said, my husband is amazing. They'd been married for over 20 years, but she said, because of the sexual abuse in my background, I always feel a little bit dirty. I feel like my husband could have done better. That kind of less than feeling, that feeling of not being quite good enough, not quite making the grade, y'all, that erodes intimacy in human relationships. But how much more so does that impede our relationship with the Lord? How much does that just strip away the potential intimacy we could have with Jesus when we feel like we're not quite good enough, that we don't make the grade with God? It's one of the reasons I love this book in the Old Testament called The Song of Songs, because really the whole point of this amazing love story, a lot of times it's taught like God's version of the Kama Sutra, and they say the application of this is for sexual intimacy in marriage, but it's so much bigger than that. The real point of this book is the kind of amazing intimacy we can have with Jesus, our heavenly bridegroom, and how he never, ever, ever gives us a dress 2 sizes too small and says, if you'll just get into this dress, I'll fall in love with you. This book is all about how he loves us just the way we are. And I'm just going to give you 2 snippets from this story. We don't have the time to go throughout the entire Song of Songs, but I'm going to give you the cliff notes, the highlights of this story. It's based on a true love story about a guy named Solomon. Y'all know him. He was the 3rd king of Israel. He's David's smart son. And the love of his life, a girl who he calls in chapter 6, Shulamite. Now, the name Shulamite in Hebrew is like the feminine version of the name Solomon. So they're kind of like Robert and Roberta. And Shulamite starts the story with her voice. She's the leading lady. Here's how she starts this Old Testament book of poetry. She says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Your anointing oils are fragrant. Your name is oil poured out. Therefore, virgins love you. Draw me after you. Let us run together." And she's pretty aggressive initially. My mama tried to teach me when I was younger. I grew up in the South, and my mom is very proper. And she said, "Lisa, girls don't chase boys. Girls respond. Boys chase, girls respond. Boys initiate, girls respond." I'm 52 and single. I don't know that that has actually worked that well for me. But when I was growing up, I thought I couldn't ever be that honest about my romantic feelings for a man. So when I first studied the Song of Solomon, I thought, wow, Rooney. I mean, this chick's pretty aggressive. I mean, she just lays all her cards on the table from the get-go. She says, basically, "I'm really into you," to Solomon, the king of Israel. But then evidently somebody said something to her that reminded her of those feelings of being less than. Somebody in the background reminded her that she wasn't good enough to date the king of Israel, because right after saying, "I am so into you," she starts backing up, because the next passage, she kind of basically backs up. She qualifies telling Solomon that she has a crush on him. And Shulamite says this, "I'm very dark but lovely." This is in verse 5. "O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon, don't gaze at me because I am dark, because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept." In other words, she's saying, oh, good night. Why did I just confess to the king of Israel that I have a crush on him? I mean, there's no way a guy like that would be interested in a girl like me. I'm just a regular girl. When she says, "My brothers made me keep the vineyard," in modern context, that'd be like she's working on a farm in a rural area and she's got calluses on her hands from the weed eater. You know, she hasn't had a mani-pedi recently. And she realizes, oh, good night, I'm just a regular girl. I don't get mani-pedis. I don't have crystals on my cell phone cover. And I have just confessed to the king of Israel that I have a huge crush on him. And she realizes, why would a guy like that love a girl like me? So she starts backing up, in effect thinking, I need to get 2 dress sizes smaller before I go for this guy. But his response is unbelievable, y'all. After she says, "You probably wouldn't be interested in a girl like me," here's Solomon's response. This is actually the first thing Solomon, the bridegroom in this story, and also the metaphor for Jesus, our divine bridegroom, here's the first thing he says to his would-be bride. "If you do not know, O most beautiful among women, follow in the tracks of the flock and pasture your young goats beside the shepherd's tents. I compare you, my love, to a mayor among Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with strings of jewels." Verse 15, "Behold, you are beautiful, my love. You are beautiful." In other words, yes, I have a crush on you too. I want to be with you too. It's just this incredible response. Once she backs up and thinks, yikes, there's no way he's going to like me, he leans in and says, oh, I don't just like you. I want to date you. I want to court you. You are the woman for me. And the next few chapters of the Song of Songs details exactly that. Solomon and Shulamite begin to fall in love. He courts her. He asks her to marry him. And in chapter 4, we've actually got the details of their royal wedding. And y'all, this was a big deal because Israel was a political power at the time in this ancient era. Solomon is the king of Israel. He's getting married. So this was kind of like Charles and Di if you're over 40. If you're under 40, this was kind of like William and Kate. It was a royal wedding. So people have come from all over the Middle East to witness Solomon, the bridegroom, marrying Shulamite. It's this amazing wedding, and they wrote their own vows because, of course, this is ancient culture, so they didn't have the vows that we repeat nowadays or when I hear a young couple has written their own vows, I always kind of inwardly wince because they sound like Bee Gees lyrics. These are the vows Solomon wrote for Shulamite in this ancient era. And this is what he says to her. They're on top of the hill. They're next to where the temple is being built in Jerusalem. On top of that hill, he turns to her in front of everybody, this very regular girl. She wasn't a debutante. She wasn't royalty. And he says to her, "Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats, leaping down the slopes of Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep, shorn ewes that have come up from the washing, all of which bear twins, and not one among them has lost its young. Your lips are like a scarlet thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built in rows of stone." I'm going to stop right there because I'm afraid some of y'all may be getting the wrong picture of what she looked like. When he said her hair is like a flock of goats coming down Mount Gilead, he wasn't saying she needed to go to the salon or that she needed better conditioner. He's not saying her hair is really goat-y. He's saying your hair is long, black, and curly, because he's referring to black goats that would descend from the top of Mount Gilead and come down to the lower pastures. And when you watch those goats descend in the late afternoon, it looked like a long black satin ribbon. So she too was probably Middle Eastern. He's saying you have gorgeous, long, black hair. When he says your teeth look like sheep that have just been washed and they're all wearing twins, you can probably guess what he's saying there. He's saying her teeth are white, and more importantly, she has all her teeth. Each bear twins. That's a big deal in this period of ancient history because they didn't have dental care. So it's a big deal. She has all her teeth. They're straight. They're white. She's got a gorgeous smile. He says, you have a long neck. So he's basically saying, you are absolutely gorgeous. I love you. And then in this wedding vow, the most beautiful thing he says to her, and y'all, it's critical to remember that God wrote the Song of Solomon, this love song. Remember, it's the song of all songs. So it's a favorite song on God's iPod. He wrote this as a metaphor for us to understand how much he loves us. So Jesus is the implied bridegroom here, and we are like Shulamite. We're the regular girls that get to be married to the King of all kings. Solomon says to Shulamite at the end of the wedding vows, and I just imagine him looking right into her eyes in front of all those wedding guests. He says, with one glance, with just one glance of your eyes, you captured my heart. That's Song of Solomon, chapter 4, verse 9. And y'all, that is the gospel in the Old Testament. With one glance of your eyes, you captured my heart. Can you imagine God saying that to you? I think so much of the insecurity we deal with as women, sometimes that we're oppressed by as women, the if only you could fit in a dress that was smaller, if only you used your inside voice more, if only your hair wasn't chemically dependent, if only you had a higher metabolism, or if only you were bigger because your hips aren't quite big enough based on reality television. If only we labor under this false sense of if I get to here, maybe I'll be enough. Maybe I'll really be worthy of perfect love. And God says, no, with just one glance of your eyes, you captured my heart. You had me at hello. I love that verse in the Song of Songs because to me, that's Jesus right there. Jesus looks at us through eyes of love, rose-colored glasses, if you will, and he says, with just one glance, you captured my heart. His mercy is so much bigger than most of us ever give him credit for. And if we could just rest there, y'all, it would make all our other human relationships healthy. Speaking of human relationships, I was reading a book not too long ago called Stones in the River. It's a novel. It's about a girl named Trudy, and Trudy is a dwarf, and she hasn't had any romantic relationship. She works in a library. She's kind of cut off from society. And then she meets a young man named Max who's come to Germany to basically to heal after the war. And he starts coming into the library day after day, and he develops a friendship with Trudy. And Trudy thinks it's just platonic. She thinks there's no way this handsome soldier could be attracted to me because I'm just a dwarf. And he falls in love with her. He confesses to Trudy that he loves her. And the whole time she thinks, there's no way. He must be playing me. And my favorite scene in that novel, Stones in a River, is Max and Trudy. They've gone to swim in the river that's at the edge of this German village. And they're sunning themselves outside the river. And Trudy is lying there in her perfect miniature body next to Max, this soldier who's fallen for her. And he begins to trace the outline of her body in the dirt. And the whole time he's tracing the outline of her body, he's telling her how absolutely beautiful he believes she is. And she fusses at him because at first she thinks that Max is mocking her. And it's not until he turns toward her and his eyes are filled with tears and he says, Trudy, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever met, that she realizes, he does love me. He does love me. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Y'all, that's the point of the Song of Songs. That's the point of the gospel, really. We see it through the life of this woman who's just like us, Shulamite. Initially, she thinks there is no way a really great guy could fall in love with a girl like me. And over and over and over again, Solomon proves, you're the one I want, you're the one I love. With just one glance, you captured my heart. You had me at hello. Y'all, that's exactly what God is saying to us every day through his word, through his Holy Spirit. You're the one I love. With one glance of your eyes, you captured my heart. You had me at hello. I love you just exactly the way you are.